Yeshayahu, Perek, Yud Aleph, Isaiah chapter 11. There are 16 verses. V'yatzachoter megezi Yishai, v'netzer misharashav yifreh. And a shoot shall spring forth from the stem of Jesse, and some translate it from the stump of Jesse. And a twig shall sprout from his roots. V'nacha alav ruach Adonai, ruach chokhmah ubina, ruach etza ugevura, ruach da'at v'yirat Adonai. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and heroism, a spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. V'haricho birat Adonai, v'lo lemar'e einav yishpot, v'lo lemishma oznav yochiach. And he shall be animated by the fear of the Lord, and neither with the sight of his eyes he shall judge, nor with the hearing of his ears shall he chastise. V'shafat b'tzedek dalim v'hochiach v'mishor le'anvei aretz v'hika eretz b'shevet piv uveruach slifatav yamit rasha. And he shall judge the poor justly, and he shall chastise with equity the humble of the earth, and he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall put the wicked to death. So, previously in reading Torah or the prophets, I would just read the Hebrew and the English, but I think in this cycle, I'll stop and pause for reflection and for questions. This chapter is said to be speaking of the Messiah. Both Jews and Christians agree that this chapter is talking about the coming Messiah, or the Messiah who came already and will be coming again. So there's a common denominator here. And I just have a question on verse 3. And it says, V'haricho birat Adonai. He shall be animated by the fear of the Lord. What does it mean that the Messiah is animated? They translated animated. This is the Chabad translation. He shall be animated by the fear of the Lord. V'haricho. I'm wondering what the etymology of that word is. At first glance, I would think it had to do with reach, which is like smell, sense of smell, but I don't think that connects with animated, the way they translate it. But in any case, what does it mean that the Messiah will not judge with the sight of his eyes, and with the hearing of his ears he will not chastise? How are we supposed to understand that? I'll leave that as a question and hope to receive an answer someday. It says that he will judge the poor justly, and he will chastise with equity the humble of the earth, and he will smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall put the wicked to death. Okay, that's poetic, but that's relatively understandable. So, okay, let's continue. V'hayat tzedek ezor matnav v'emunah ezor chalatzav. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faith the girdle of his loins. V'gar ze'ev im keves, v'namer im gedi, ירבץ, ועגל וכפיר ומרי יחדיו, ונער קטון נוהג בם. And a wolf shall lie with a lamb. People, I think, often confuse this. They say it's always in common parlance. It's always said of the lion and the lamb, but it's actually, if you look in the verse here, it's the wolf. And it makes sense because the wolves are often eating lambs, and they're known for that. I'm not saying that a lion wouldn't, but it seems that a wolf is the one that's more of the famously known to kill the lamb. But anyway, and a wolf shall lie with a lamb, a leopard shall lie with a kid, and a calf and a lion cub and a fatling shall lie together, and a small child shall lead them. Upara v'dov tir'ena yachdav, Yirbitzu yaldehen, v'aryeh kabakar yochal tevin. And a cow and a bear shall graze together, and their children shall lie, and a lion, like cattle, shall eat straw. Yeshayahu, that's what he was talking about. I was mentioning something about the Shah Nehorim, the 370 lights, and someone made a reference to, I think this is it, Yeshayahu, Yonek, and an infant shall play. Yeshayahu is like Shashuim, I think. It's like toys. Shashuim, I think. Play, it's like things that you play with. Yeshayahu Yonek imchur paten. And an infant shall play over the hole of an old snake. This seems like some kind of metaphor or something. And an infant shall play over the hole of an old snake, and over the eyeball of an adder, and a weaned child shall stretch forth his hand. I think this is my own interpretation, but a yonek is a young child. If you think about Adam and Eve, even though they were created as adults, they were basically babies, and they were easily corruptible. They were easily conned, or even if you want to say that Adam had a relationship with God and he rebelled, but still he was young. He was like a young boy, and his wife convinced him, and then he said, "Oh, my wife did it." So they're young kids, really. They were babies. They were, imagine, full of grown adults, but their minds were babies. And who is this old snake here? This old snake seems to be a reference to the serpent in the garden. So it's like they will play and they won't be hurt this time, which is a reference to, it seems to me, a reference to back to the garden, to innocence, and that won't be able to be corrupted by the serpent this time. And an infant shall play over the hole of an old snake, and over the eyeball of an adder, and a weaned child shall stretch forth his hand. Lo yareu v'lo yashchitu b'chol har kadshi ki mala haaretz de'a et Adonai kamayim layam mechasim. Famous verses. They shall neither harm nor destroy in all of my holy mount, for the land shall be full of knowledge of the Lord, as water covers the sea. Kamayim layam mechasim. The seabed, it says here. Kamayim layam mechasim. V'haya bayom hahu Shoresh Yishai. So it says on that day. So this is in a future time, and it doesn't seem to have been fulfilled yet. Although one can make the argument that a lot of it has been fulfilled. There has been much knowledge of God that has gone around the earth. Not to everyone, but it's definitely more than it was. But it's still up for debate. It's still debatable. Let's put it that way. לא יראו ולא ישחיתו בכל הר קדשי, כי מלאה הארץ דעה את אדוני. אוקיי. והיה ביום ההוא שורש ישעיה אשר עומד לנס עמים, אליו גויים ידרשו, והייתה menuchato kavod. And it shall come to pass on that day that the root of Jesse, which stands as a banner for peoples, to him shall the nations inquire, and his peace shall be with honor. So it seems pretty clear who the nations are inquiring after at this time. Quite a few nations, most of the world, in fact, in terms of, if you want to talk about nations. And so, if in the Jewish perspective, there would be another Messiah that the nations would seek after, who is different than the one that they are already seeking after. That's just the plain meaning of the text. And okay. All right, verse 11. והיה ביום ההוא יוסיף אדוני שנית ידו לקנות את שאר עמו, אשר יישאר מאשור וממצרים ומפטרוס ומכוש ומאלם ומשנער ומחמת ומאיי הים. And it shall come to pass on that day, the Lord shall continue to apply his hand a second time to acquire the rest of his people. And it shall come to pass on the day the Lord shall continue to apply his hand a second time. What's that second time about? Anything come to mind? To acquire the rest of his people. Liknot et shar amo asher yishaer, that will remain from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Samaria and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. Now it's hard to really know what this is referring to, because when you look at these lands, Egypt and Pathros and Cush and these places, do they have a connection to today? Is it referencing? Are they translatable to today? My primary way of understanding Torah and prophets and the writings is through gematria. And so my first approach would be to gematriatize each one of these, but that's a lot. It's a lot of time. So right now, unless the interpretation comes to me intuitively, we can move on. Okay, ונעשה ונס לגויים ואסף תלכי ישראל ונפוצות יהודה יקבץ מארבע כנפות הארץ. And he shall raise a banner to the nations, and he shall gather the lost of Israel and the scattered ones of Judah. He shall gather from the four corners of the earth. ושרה קנאת אפרים וצוררי יהודה מכרתו. Ephraim lo yikane et Yehuda, Yehuda lo yatzor et Ephraim. And the envy of Ephraim shall cease, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, nor shall Judah vex Ephraim. V'yafu b'chatef plishtim yama. This verse 13 seems to me a reference to the north and southern kingdoms, the two kingdom of the north, Ephraim, and back then, but it probably has its ramifications, its connections to today as well. There's Ephraim and Judah, and Yeravam ben Nevat was from Shevet Ephraim, and that was a split, the original split at the time of Rechavam, after Solomon, but it would seem to have, like I said, ramifications to today as well. ויעפו בחטף פלישתים ימה יחדיו יבוזו את בני קדם אדום ומואב משלוח ידם, ובני עמון משמעתם. And they shall fly of one accord against the Philistines in the west. Together they shall plunder the children of the east. Upon Edom and Moab they shall stretch forth their hand, and the children of Ammon shall obey them. והחרים אדוני את לשון ים מצרים, והניף ידו על הנהר בים רוחו, והיכהו לשבע נחלים, והדריך בנעלים. This is interesting. And the Lord shall dry up the tongue of the Egyptian sea. He shall lift his hand over the river with the strength of his wind, and he shall beat it into 7 streams. This is very fascinating. He shall lead the exiles with shoes. V'hidrich b'ne'alim. He will lead the exiles with shoes. What does it mean that he will lead the exiles with shoes? That seems really okay. If you look at Rashi and you want to look at a real pashut, simple explanation, that he'll beat the 7 streams, he'll beat it into 7 streams, and he'll lead the exiles in shoes. He's interpreting it literally, that if you have shoes, you walk on dry land. But it seems to me that all of these rivers are not limited to literal rivers. There's something more than just water and physically dry land. It just seems to me that it's more than that. And so, while you can interpret it literally that way, that your shoes will walk on dry land, it seems that these shoes have something to do with walking into new reality. And that's something that is tied to this week's Torah portion. It says in Bereshit, it equals 9:13, and when God said to Moses, Shal nalecha mel reglecha, that equals 9:13 as well. So there's something about shoes and the creation of a new reality. And na'al in Hebrew means to lock, not just a shoe, it means to lock. That's na'ul, agan na'ul, a locked or hidden garden. And so the shoes, when you tie them, it locks the protection over your feet, and that's how you walk. But when you take off your shoes, you're no longer locked into that way of walking. That's the idea, and it seems to comport with this verse here, that when the nations will walk through these rivers, what it really means is that, or one meaning can be, is that they're going through paradigm shifts. They're going through existential and fundamental changes of reality. And that is symbolized by the shoes. Okay? And now we continue to verse 16, the final verse. והייתה מסילה לשאר עמו, אשר יישאר מאשור, כאשר הייתה לישראל ביום עלותו מארץ מצרים. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people who remain from Assyria, as there was for Israel on the day they went up from the land of Egypt, in the midst of the water for the remnants of the people. So Rashi adds that this highway or this path will be in the midst of the water. Doesn't say anything about that in the verse, but that's Isaiah chapter 11.